Hello, welcome to my last webcast of 2021. We're going to be talking about Howard's End, such a great book. This is my old copy from university. I've read it so many times over the years, and it was so great to reread it for Emily's Walking Book Club. We met just last Sunday on a dry but grizzly, cold, muddy day. I don't know what you think about rereading books. I always find that even if it's the same book, when I read it again at this different time of life, I find something totally new in it. I will come to read out the bit that really struck me this time as being particularly special. So look, here is a sort of postcard scribbled in notes. We only got through about half of this, and this itself is about, a millionth of what there is to say about this book. I think this is the thing when we talk about a classic, it's a classic for a reason. However flawed it is, and not everybody loved the book. A few people found the plot slightly silly, they couldn't connect with some of the characters, maybe they felt it hadn't aged all that well. In spite of these flaws, I think it's such a meaty book. There's so much in it, and what a joy to even scratch the surface. So as I said, not everyone loved this book, but most people really did. We started off by talking about the epigram, which is got to be like one of the most famous epigrams ever. I'm going to find it here just to show you. Where is it? It says, it's really boring. Here we go. Only connect. And, that's just one of those phrases that people say again and again. You say, oh, Howard's End, only connect. EM Forster, only connect. Only connect. And they say it again and again because it is so important. So in this book, there are essentially three families that are sort of arranged beside each other. There's the Wilcoxes. So there's Henry Wilcox, who's this kind of big businessman. He's shown to be a real imperialist. And his first wife, Ruth Wilcox, who's shown as being kind of the past, quite spiritual, quite calm. It's actually slightly puzzling as to why the two of them are together. And they have come into contact with the Schlegels. So the Schlegel sisters are Margaret and Helen. Sorry, some reason I always get the names in a pickle in my head. Margaret, who's kind of develops a great friendship with Ruth Wilcox. They have the same kind of measuredness, a sort of spiritual understanding of people and life. Helen, who's shown to be kind of tempestuous and impulsive and full of passion. And they also have a younger brother called Tibby. But yeah, the Schlegel sisters are sort of core to the book. And then there is Leonard Bast, who is a sort of poor man. He's a clerk. He's described somewhere as being just on the edge of the abyss, not kind of so poor that it's kind of unimaginable for the Schlegels and the Wilcoxes, but just on the edge of that life. He's just kind of clinging to enough to get by. And his wife, Jackie Bast, who is not particularly sympathetically portrayed as a bit of a kind of floozy, drunken, sort of slightly, bawdy or lewd woman. So yeah, here are these three couples, I suppose. Helen and Margaret Schlegel, Ruth and Henry Wilcox, and Leonard and Jackie Bast. And what Forster does is, through this kind of quite serpentine plot of connections, he kind of shows the way their lives are intertwined and the connections between them. And so these can be quite I suppose, straightforward connections, like the fact that Margaret Schlegel, after Ruth Wilcox dies, Margaret Schlegel ends up marrying Henry Wilcox. But they can also be slightly more nebulous connections. So I think the friendship between Margaret and Ruth, he sort of shows this kind of spiritual connection between them. It's sort of harder to define. And then he also shows the way some of these lives are kind of in parallel to one another. So there are a lot of connections between the characters, but I think the crux of this idea of to only connect comes right towards the end of the book. Okay, spoiler alert, Helen Schlegel ends up getting pregnant out of wedlock with Leonard Bast. So it's sort of a bit of a surprise. And she wants to have this, she ends up at Howard's End, which is not just the title of the book, but the name of a place, this family home, which I hope you'll come on to. And she wants to have this night at Howard's End with Margaret, but the house technically belongs to Henry Wilcox, who at this point Margaret has married. And Margaret feels she has to go and ask Henry's permission. And this comes right at the end of the book. And I'll just read out what she says, if I can find the page. Hang on. Here we go. So Margaret, who throughout has been all kind of measured and calm and quite sort of canny in the way she manipulates people and you know, really understanding how people think, she just loses it. Okay, so Forster says, Margaret rushed at him and seized both his hands. She was transfigured. Not any more of this, she cried. You shall see the connection if it kills you, Henry. You have had a mistress. I forgave you. My sister has a lover. You drive her from the house. Do you see the connection? Stupid, hypocritical, cruel, oh, contemptible, a man who insults his wife when she's alive and cants with her memory when she's dead. A man who ruins a woman for his pleasure and casts her off to ruin other men and gives bad financial advice and then says he is not responsible. These men are you. You can't recognize them because you cannot connect. I've had enough of your unweeded kindness. I've spoilt you long enough. All your life you have been spoilt. Mrs. Wilcox spoiled you. No one has ever told you what you are, muddled, criminally muddled. Men like you use repentance as a blind, so don't repent. Only say to yourself, what Helen has done, I've done. So she's saying you have to connect with someone. You have to see that you are in them, that they are in you, that we're all human, that we've got to empathize with each other and connect. And it's such a sort of great thing to remember. So we talked a lot about that, and we talked also about the way Forster wants us to connect also to the past and feel kind of quite rooted in tradition and almost a spiritual past. And then there's also Howard's End, the place itself, which the characters connect to in different ways. There's the Wilcoxes, most of the Wilcoxes see it as a kind of asset, something that's worth money, an investment, or not. Whereas the Schlegels feel it as to be a home. And we had a great discussion about house versus home. And indeed, a few people mentioned how contemporary this book felt, particularly in this treatment of a house, and whether it being just a means of holding money or being sort of redolent of something almost spiritual. And I will read out my favourite bit, which is, hang on, I got to find the page number. It's when Margaret goes off to Howard's End and is looking around, and there's this amazing character called Mrs. Avery, who's the sort of spiritual custodian of Howard's End. She cares for it, and she's unbeknownst to the Schlegels. Margaret sent her possessions, or her furniture and things, to be stored at Howard's End, and Mrs. Avery takes it upon herself to unpack all the boxes and put the furniture around, and Margaret's sort of wandering through Howard's End, feeling kind of amazed by this home. So, oh gosh, that's not that page. Hang on. Okay, so she's walking through it. So she paced back into the hall, and as she did so, the house reverberated. "Is that you, Henry?" she called. There was no answer, but the house reverberated again. "Henry, have you got in?" But it was the heart of the house beating, faintly at first, then loudly, martially. It dominated the rain. It is the starved imagination, not the well-nourished, that is afraid. Margaret flung open the door to the stairs. A noise as of drums seemed to deafen her. A woman, an old woman, was descending, with figure erect, with face impassive, with lips that parted and said dryly, "Oh, well, I took you for Ruth Wilcox." Margaret stammered. "I, Mrs. Wilcox, I. In fancy, of course, in fancy. You had her way of walking. Good day." And the old woman passed out into the rain. It's so mysterious, and it's so clever, the way he takes this quite spiritual, strange idea of a house having a heart and these sort of reverberating heartbeats, but makes it completely plausible, because it is, that sound is real. It is totally real. It's the woman, it's Mrs. Avery walking down the stairs that's making that noise. But that noise is at the same time the heartbeat of the house. I love that moment, and it actually really makes me think of the echo in the Marabar Caves in A Passage to India, another of Forster's great novels. There's so much we talked about. So the connections, Howard's End itself. We talked a bit about the way he shows these two worlds, the kind of inner world of connection and love and sort of real meaningful things, and then the outer world of stuff, and how often the world of stuff undermines the greater world, and I think particularly for Leonard Bast, how the outer world is kind of everything to him, even though he's striving to come to this spiritual understanding through music and books, but he's so ground down by poverty that actually he can't fully appreciate the Beethoven concert because he's so stressed about losing his umbrella, because he can't afford to get a new umbrella. So we talked about that, and how this contrast between the inner and outer worlds can sometimes be quite funny, and the brilliant humour in this book, and that led us on to talk about Forster's, the way he's written it and his authorial voice, the way he uses free and direct speech, how sometimes this can be a bit muddling, but sometimes it can be so sophisticated. We talked about a lot, and there's so much more to say. I'd love to know your thoughts about the book. If you've read it, or if you've read anything else by Forster, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, it's been wonderful sharing all these books with you this year. This is 2021 stack. And I'm looking forward to 2022. Ooh, hang on, balance those, which we're going to begin with these. So looking forward to next year. Have a wonderful Christmas break, a happy new year. See you in 2022.